Since the publication of the Apostolic Exhortation Amoris Laetitia in 2016, there has been a widespread resurrection of the medieval debate on the possibility of a heretical pope. The aim of my thesis is to show that this debate has already been definitively settled during the First Vatican Council, with the elevation of the doctrine of the indefectibility of the Apostolic See to dogmatic status as a secondary object of papal infallibility. The indefectibility of the Apostolic See means that the holder of the Patrine office can never defect from the faith. While contemporary papal critics maintain that the gift of indefectibility belongs to the universal church, the fathers of the First Vatican Council explicitly asserted that this gift was directly conferred upon the Apostolic See. And the extent of this problem can be demonstrated by the content of this recently published book called Defending the Faith Against Present Heresies, which it contains numerous articles by various influential scholars that claim that Pope Francis is teaching heresy and that he succumbed to formal heresy. And this book contains a foreword by Archbishop Vigano, who quite famously has claimed also that Pope Francis has fallen into heresy. According to the view presented in this book, the indefectibility of the church does not guarantee the indefectibility of the person who holds the Patrine office. They claim that the Pope is capable of teaching heresy outside the ex cathedra definitions of the extraordinary magisterium. They also appeal to Canon 212 to legitimize withholding religious submission of the will and intellect to the teachings of the ordinary magisterium, and to publicly correct the Pope for various heresies. Since 2016, there's been repeated calls for Pope Francis to answer the 5 dubia, which were submitted by 4 cardinals in an initiative spearheaded by Cardinal Raymond Burke. And the idea of publicly correcting the Pope is based on Galatians chapter 2, where St. Paul corrects St. Peter during the Apostolic Council in Jerusalem. And they also base this on Titus chapter 3, which says, warn a divisive person once, and then warn him a second time, and after that, have nothing to do with them. So the various papal critics seem to be following this template, when in 2017, there was a filial correction of Pope Francis issued by various influential scholars. And then again in 2019, which was an open letter addressed to the bishops of the world accusing Pope Francis of heresy. And this was signed by theologians such as Father Aidan Nichols. And there's also talk of a possible future fraternal correction of Pope Francis by members of the cardinalate. And if this happens, it would more or less start a formal schism. Cardinal Burke has shown that he favors the idea that a pope can fall into formal heresy by providing a foreword to this book that was recently published by Professor Roberto de Mattei. And in this book, Professor de Mattei forcefully argues that a pope is capable of teaching heresy, and Cardinal Burke has went on record to say that if a pope would formally profess heresy, he would cease by that act to be the pope. It's automatic, and so that would happen. And he bases this on the opinion of St. Robert Bellarmine, who says that a pope who is a manifest heretic ceases in himself to be pope in head, just as he ceases in himself to be a Christian and member of the body of the church, whereby he can be judged and punished by the church. But what the papal critics don't mention is that St. Robert Bellarmine went on to conclude that God would never allow a pope to fall into formal heresy or to teach heresy to the entire church. And that the fathers of the First Vatican Council elevated this opinion to dogma during the First Vatican Council itself. St. Robert Bellarmine goes on to give 4 opinions on a heretical pope, which were current at the time of his writing. The first was that of the reformers, who taught that a pope could teach heresy in both the extraordinary and or ordinary magisterium, even when assisted by a general or ecumenical council. The second opinion was that of the Gallicans, and they held that a pope could be a formal heretic and teach heresy acting alone without the assistance of an ecumenical council. The third opinion was that of Albert Pigius, who taught that a pope could never in any way be a heretic nor publicly teach heresy. So Pigius held that a pope could not even be a material heretic or teach heresy in his capacity as a private theologian. And then the fourth opinion is that in a certain measure, whether the pope can be a heretic or not, he cannot define a heretical proposition that must be believed by the whole church in any way. This is a very common opinion of all Catholics. And then St. Robert goes on to say that from these 4 opinions, the first is heretical, the second is not properly heretical, for we see that some who follow this opinion are tolerated by the church, even though it seems altogether erroneous and proximate to heresy. The third is probable, though it is still not certain. The fourth is very certain and must be asserted, and we will state a few propositions so that it can be understood and confirmed more easily. And so St. Robert Bellarmine goes on to give these 4 propositions. The first is that the Pope can never err when he teaches the whole church in matters pertaining to the faith. The second is not only can the Roman Pontiff not err in faith, but even the particular Roman Church cannot err. And then the third is not only can the Supreme Pontiff not err in decrees of faith, but even in precepts of morals which are prescribed for the whole church. And then the fourth, it is probable and maybe pastly be believed that not only as Pope can the Supreme Pontiff not err, but he cannot be a heretic even as a particular person by pertinaciously believing something false against the faith. Now, it's important to note that this fourth proposition is different from the view of Albert Pigius, because it just says that as Pope, the Supreme Pontiff cannot err, and it says that he cannot be a formal heretic as opposed to not be a material heretic. And St. Robert held this position because he thought that Christ's prayer for the unfailing faith of St. Peter would protect the Pope from falling into formal heresy and teaching heresy to the entire church. And he says that it is gathered correctly that the Pope, by his own nature, can fall into heresy, but not when we posit the singular assistance of God, which Christ asked for him by his prayer. And this refers to Christ's prayer for St. Peter, where he says, I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And that's in Luke 22:32. And so St. Robert concluded that Christ's prayer had two privileges for the Pope. And the first was that the Pope could never lose the true faith insofar as he was tempted by the devil, meaning he could never fall into formal heresy. And the second privilege was that he, as the Pope, could never teach something against the faith, or that there would never be one found in his see who would teach against the true faith. And the important thing to note here is that the fathers of the First Vatican Council understood that Bellarmine's opinion on the indefectibility of the Apostolic See was going to be raised to dogma as a result of the as a secondary object of papal infallibility. And we can see here that it says that in the official relatio of Vatican I, Bishop Gosser says that the deputation is unjustly accused of wanting to raise an extreme opinion, that of Albert Pigius, to the dignity of a dogma. And then he goes on to say that the doctrine in the proposed chapter is not that of Albert Pigius, but its extreme opinion of any school, but rather is one and the same which Bellarmine teaches in the place cited by the Reverend Speaker, and which Bellarmine adduces in the fourth place called most certain and assured. And this is the fourth proposition, where it just concludes that a pope cannot be a formal heretic or to teach heresy in his capacity as pope. And this was because the fathers of the First Vatican Council understood that papal infallibility was directly predicated on the indefectibility of the Apostolic See. And we can see that one of the fathers of the First Vatican Council wanted pontifical infallibility to be deduced expressly from the apostolicity and indefectibility of the Church. And then Bishop Gosser goes on to say that it's not needed because it's already included in the chapter in Pastor Aeternus, which is the dogmatic constitution of the Church, which solemnly defined papal infallibility. And we can see in Pastor Aeternus itself, it refers to the indefectibility of the Apostolic See and includes the formula of Pope Hermisdus, which states, in the Apostolic See, the Catholic religion has always been preserved immaculate and sacred doctrine honoured. And then again, it says, therefore, the bishops of the whole world, sometimes singly, sometimes assembled in councils, following the long-standing custom of the churches in the form of the instant rule, reported to this Apostolic See, particularly the dangers that arose in matters of faith, so that there especially, where the faith cannot suffer impairment, the injuries to the faith may be repaired. And then again, it says that this charism of truth and of never failing faith was conferred upon Peter and his successors in this chair. So the fathers of the First Vatican Council understood that the indefectibility of the Apostolic See was going to be raised to dogmatic status as a secondary object of papal infallibility. So even though it wasn't solemnly defined itself, it's still a non-defined dogma. And according to the profession of faith, Catholics must give assent to both defined and non-defined dogmas. Defined dogmas must be adhered to with the first level of assent, and non-defined dogmas must be adhered to with the second level of assent. So the solution to the problem of a heretical pope is if Pope Francis or one of his successors was just to reaffirm what the fathers of the First Vatican Council taught on the indefectibility of the Apostolic See. And the profession of faith, the CDF, doctrinal commentary on the profession of faith, it says a non-defined dogma can be confirmed or reaffirmed through the ordinary magisterium. So it's just the Pope can easily teach this through, say, a papal encyclical, or it can be solemnly defined through the extraordinary magisterium, either by the Pope acting alone, ex cathedra, or together with the bishops in an ecumenical council. That's it for me there.